The danger of Athens defaulting on that debt, though, does seem to be receding. The government has announced $6.5 billion in austerity budget cuts, not without some protests. Our European Bureau Chief Stephen Beard has more now from Athens.
The plan to cut Greece's deficit has cheered investors, but Greek workers are not pleased. Hundreds of thousands have marched in protest and walked out on strike. Christos Panagiotopoulos is a trash collector in Athens. He and his workmates bitterly oppose the cutbacks.
It'll mean pay cuts and later retirement for us. I will lose $160 a month, almost 10% of my pay, and I'll have to work until I'm 63 before I can retire. This is not acceptable.
Many protesters feel they're suffering because the Greeks have been picked on by speculators and then bullied into deficit cutting by fellow Europeans. Liana Kanelli is a communist member of parliament. She says by adopting the euro almost a decade ago, Greece laid itself open to outside intervention.
If you get in this eurozone, you abolish a very severe amount of your national sovereignty. So, you see, we are not free.
But that's still a minority view. Shoppers in this fruit and vegetable market in Athens still seem happy with the euro. Though Greece no longer has the ability to devalue its currency to stimulate its own economy, no one here seems to be hankering for the days of the drachma. Nor should they, says economist Professor Gikas Hardouvelis. Greece has been much better off with the euro.
For about 10 years now, Greeks enjoy very low interest rates, very low inflation because of membership in the euro area. That's a big plus.
And a massive improvement on the double-digit inflation, high interest rates and chaos that frequently occurred when Greece managed its own currency. The present crisis is Greece's fault, says analyst John Sarapoulos. The euro is not to blame.
We rested too heavily on its stability and borrowed too heavily against future incomes. We took for granted that the good times would continue to roll.
The crisis is now taking its toll. Tavernas seem rather less busy than before. And something else. Greece's laid-back relations with fellow Eurozone members have been rudely shaken, especially with Germany. Many Greeks were furious at the flinty refusal of Europe's biggest economy to consider any financial aid for Athens. And so Greece has now broken the unspoken rule of European politics: don't mention the war.
Es spricht der Führer.
Over the past week or so, the Greek airwaves have been awash with archived newsreel footage of Germany's least popular export. News shows have reminded viewers of Hitler's occupation of Greece. Communist Member of Parliament Liana Kanelli regards German domination of the Eurozone as another form of conquest.
You don't have to send a Messerschmitt. You don't have to send an army. You just send your big companies. And that's why sometimes I and lots of other people speak about an economic neo-Nazism that's going against European people.
Greece's Deputy Prime Minister has joined the fray, raising questions about the gold which the Nazis allegedly stole from the Greek Central Bank. How's all this going down in Germany? Tomorrow I report.
When last we heard from our man in Europe, Stephen Beard, that would be yesterday, he was in Athens, giving us the street-level view of the Greek debt crisis and how people there are none too wild about new emergency budget cuts or restrictions that might come along with a rescue package from the European Union. Stephen is back today with the second part of the story in which we hear how Europe's biggest and richest economy, Germany, isn't all that crazy about a rescue either.
I'm on Unter den Linden, the wide, elegant boulevard that runs through the centre of Berlin. This is more than 1,000 miles north of Athens and a very different world. It's very cold here today, in fact freezing, and there's not much warmth or affection for the Greeks either.
Ja, rausschmeißen aus der EG. Rausschmeißen.
Kick them out of the EU. Yes, kick them out, says this cab driver.
Also mein Vater hat immer gesagt, ein guter Gärtner.
He says, my father used to say a good gardener needs a hard heart and a sharp axe. Yes, cut the Greeks out. It's that simple. What's the problem?
Haben die ein Küppimus noch bitte?
The Einstein Coffee House, a few yards further along the road. This is a famous watering hole for politicians and commentators. Here, there's also a marked lack of sympathy for the Greeks' predicament.
When they joined the Euro Club, we thought the Greeks understood the rules and played by them. But they didn't. They fiddled the statistics, and that is something that the Germans don't like.
Analyst Heinz Schulte says most Germans are appalled that Greek governments covertly borrowed 4 times the limit allowed under those Euro Club rules. And they're not happy the Greeks buckled under the monetary discipline and then harped on Germany's Nazi past.
Sorry, we didn't stormtroop them into the euro. They wanted it, and they should have read the rules.
Germans say they have every reason to be furious with the Greeks and finicky about financial rules.
Money makes the world go around, the world go around, the world go around.
The movie Cabaret was set in Berlin in the early 1930s during the Weimar Republic. Rampant inflation helped fuel the rise of the Nazis. That fact has been burnt into the German soul. But, say the Greeks, on the subject of the Nazis, how about paying us some more war reparations? We've already paid and paid and paid again, says Matthias Warnecke of Germany's Taxpayers Association.
German taxpayers pay the biggest share into the European budget, from which Greece is getting a lot of money. I think we have helped Greece a lot.
To the tune of around $50 billion. The Greeks claim they're not seeking financial aid from Germany, just moral support. But few doubt that if Greece comes close to default, cash will be needed to save them. OK, says Warnecke, as long as it's not our cash.
Well, it's pretty obvious that German taxpayers are not responsible for a rather careless fiscal policy in Greece.
Nevertheless, there are some analysts here who say German taxpayers may well wind up footing the bill. Put simply, they argue Germany can't afford to stand back and watch the Greeks go bust.
You can be sure that Germany would jump in, at least with guarantees, because German banks' interests are at stake at the moment.
Ansgar Belker of the German Institute for Economic Research says German banks have lent billions to southern European countries and are very afraid.
If Greece falls, also Spain would be heavily damaged. And our banks are even more involved in Spain than in Greece.
German banks are believed to have lent more than $500 billion to other vulnerable Eurozone countries. If these economies crash, the euro could collapse. There would be turmoil in one of Germany's most important markets. If push comes to shove, says Belker, after much huffing and puffing about moral hazard, the Germans would probably pay up. In Berlin, this is Stephen Beard for Marketplace.